Through the tinted window, Elias watched the city shrink beneath him. Charleston's steeples, the silver glint of the harbor, the streets he once knew like the back of his hand. But now, they felt like a foreign map, one he hadn't walked in years. The wheels touched down with a soft thud. His assistant, Rachel, was already reaching for the door before the aircraft even came to a stop. Elias didn't move. His hand lingered near the window, fingers curling against the glass like he was trying to touch the life he used to have, or maybe the one he gave up. "Mr. Whitaker, your car is ready," she said gently, not pushing. He nodded without looking at her. "Thanks." Outside, a sleek black town car waited on the tarmac. The driver opened the door, nodding with rehearsed professionalism. Elias slid in, adjusted his cufflinks, and said nothing. The air conditioning blasted softly against his skin, but the coldest thing in the car was still him. The invitation sat unopened on the seat beside him. Thick cream cardstock, gold embossing. Elegant. Timeless. Colin Reeves and Ivy Monroe request your presence at their wedding. Elias had tried not to react the moment he saw her name printed beneath Colin's. He hadn't even known they knew each other. Charleston was a small enough town for the past to loop back on itself, but this? It felt like a punch that hadn't landed until days later. 10 years. And now she was marrying his old college roommate. He rubbed his temple, eyes closed. "Just one weekend," he muttered under his breath. "Get in, show your face, get out." But his voice lacked conviction. Downtown Charleston was its own kind of luxury. Cobblestone streets, antebellum mansions, wrought iron balconies laced with ivy and mystery. People came here to fall in love, to reinvent themselves. Elias had done the opposite. He had left this place with nothing but ambition and a head full of code, and built a tech empire on the West Coast that Forbes couldn't stop writing about. They called him the visionary, the silent CEO, the bachelor king of cloud tech. But none of their headlines ever said he went home to an empty penthouse, or that he hadn't been to a wedding since Ivy's cousin's reception 9 summers ago, or that sometimes when he couldn't sleep, he typed her name into the search bar and never hit enter. The car pulled up to a boutique hotel near Broad Street, understated and beautiful, exactly what Colin would pick. As the valet opened the door, Elias hesitated, that gnawing pressure in his chest again. Regret? Nostalgia? Guilt? Something heavier than wealth and quieter than pride. Inside the lobby, the soft glow of chandeliers washed the room in honey-colored light. A string quartet played something low and slow in a nearby lounge, and then Grant Whitaker. The voice behind him was unmistakable. He turned. Colin Reeves stood there, tanned, beaming, impossibly relaxed in a linen blazer and loafers with no socks. Charleston had aged him like fine bourbon. He looked every bit the golden boy Elias remembered, smarter now, maybe even kinder. "Colin," Elias said, offering a handshake. Their grip was firm but a little too rehearsed. "You actually came," Colin laughed, clapping a hand on his shoulder. "I wasn't sure. I figured you'd be off buying an island or something." "I thought about it," Elias replied, "but crashing your wedding sounded cheaper." Colin laughed again, louder this time. Still got that dry sarcasm. "Man, it's good to see you." "You too." The words tasted unfamiliar. Colin motioned to the bar. "Come on, we've got the pre-rehearsal hangout going. Ivy's upstairs getting ready, but you've got to meet the crew." Elias followed him, each step heavier than the last. He hadn't heard her name said aloud in years. Not like that. Not casually. Not lovingly. And there it was again. Ivy. Upstairs. The woman he had left behind without explanation. The one who once made every minute of his life feel like music. The one he had ghosted without a goodbye, thinking he was sparing her pain. He didn't realize he'd been holding his breath until Colin opened the bar door. A burst of laughter, dozens of smiling faces, old college friends, a few new ones, Charleston locals, champagne glasses clinking. And there, across the room, through the crowd, wearing a sage green dress that caught the light like memory, Ivy. She turned just as he saw her. Their eyes locked. 2 seconds, 3, 4. She didn't blink. Neither did he. And then her face shifted, just slightly. The tight lift of her eyebrows, the way her lips pressed together. Not shock, not joy, recognition, and the kind of silence that builds between two people who never finished their last conversation. "Grant," she said. Calm, distant. He almost didn't hear her over the music. "Ivy," he said, his voice low, tight, controlled. "You two know each other?" Colin asked, oblivious. "If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thoughts matter to me either way." Ivy glanced at him. "We went to school together." That was it. Nothing else. No mention of midnight drives down Folly Beach. No reference to whispered dreams in college dorms. No echo of the words she once whispered against his collarbone. "Don't disappear on me." Elias forced a smile. "A long time ago." Colin laughed. "Small world, huh? I'll let you two catch up." He moved away. Ivy didn't. She looked at Elias like someone remembering something they'd worked hard to forget. He waited for her to speak. She didn't. He took a step closer. "I didn't know you were marrying Colin." She tilted her head. "I didn't know you still existed." It hit harder than he expected. Before he could reply, she turned away, walking toward a group of women near the back. Bridesmaids. One of them handed her a drink. She smiled, but not at him. And just like that, Elias Whitaker, the man who had built an empire, realized something terrifying. He might have returned to Charleston for a wedding, but it was about to become a reckoning. Rain tapped gently against the tall windows of the hotel's private dining room, a whisper of sound under the steady hum of soft jazz and polished laughter. The rehearsal dinner had shifted indoors as the sky outside turned pewter, folding Charleston into one of its quiet, humid evenings. Elias sat at the far end of a long candlelit table, his fingers lightly brushing the rim of his untouched wine glass, eyes fixed, though he tried not to be, on the woman seated across the room. Ivy Monroe, the bride-to-be, the ghost of his past, the one he left behind. She hadn't looked at him again since their earlier exchange. Not once. She was doing what she had always done so well, appearing completely composed, even while something brewed just beneath the surface. He could see it in the way her fingers clutched the edge of her champagne flute a little too tightly, in the way her laugh came a second too late. He knew that laugh. He knew it when it was real. "Lost in thought?" a voice asked. Elias blinked. Across from him, a woman had taken the seat to his right. She was tall, confident, and assessing him with open curiosity. "Brianna?" she said, extending a hand. "Maid of honor. Ivy's best friend since high school." "Elias Whitaker," he said, accepting the handshake. "Oh, I know who you are." Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "You're the name she never said out loud, but I heard in the way she went quiet sometimes." He didn't respond. Brianna leaned in slightly, lowering her voice beneath the clatter of silverware and conversation. "You're the one who disappeared, right?" He turned to look at her fully now. "That depends on who's telling the story." "From where I'm sitting," she said, cool and steady, "it looks like you walked out of her life without a goodbye, and now you're back just in time to watch her marry someone else. That's not why I came." "No?" She tilted her head. "Then why are you here?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Elias looked past her, toward Ivy. She was talking to Colin now, leaning in as he whispered something to her. She smiled again, reflexively, beautifully, painfully. "I'm here because he's my friend," Elias said finally, keeping his voice low. "And she's not?" Brianna asked softly, almost kindly. "Did you come here to celebrate or to haunt her?" He didn't have an answer for that. She gave him a long look, then leaned back. "Look, I'm not trying to be cruel. I just need to know if I should be worried." "Worried?" "Ivy doesn't let many people in. She builds walls that look like gardens and smiles that taste like lies. But when someone breaks through, she doesn't recover easily." Elias swallowed the weight in his throat. "I'm not here to hurt her," he said. Brianna nodded once. "Then don't." A soft chime rang from the far end of the room. Colin stood up, lifting his glass. "All right, folks," he said cheerfully. "Before we wrap up, I want to raise a toast to the woman who said yes to me twice. Once when I asked her out, and again when I asked her to spend forever with me." Polite laughter, applause. All eyes turned to Ivy. She stood slowly, lifting her glass, smile steady. "To forever, then," she said, her voice clear, smooth. Elias's gaze didn't waver, but Ivy's did. Their eyes met for the briefest moment, and in that fraction of a second something flickered. A crack in the facade, a blink too slow, a breath too deep, and then it was gone. Later, after most of the guests had filtered out, Elias stepped outside to the courtyard. The rain had stopped, but the stone was slick, glistening under the string lights. He leaned against a wooden pillar, breathing in the scent of magnolia and memory. "She said you loved storms." He turned. Ivy stood there in a soft wrap, her arms crossed loosely in front of her. Her heels clicked gently on the wet brick as she stepped closer but didn't join him under the cover. "You used to stand in the middle of the rain," she added, "as if it could wash away whatever you were thinking." "It never did," Elias said. She looked up at the sky, silent for a moment. "I wasn't expecting to see you here." "I didn't know it was you." She gave a short laugh, one with no joy in it. "Then why didn't you leave once you found out?" He hesitated. "Because I wasn't sure if I was allowed to." "You gave up that right a long time ago." "I know." She looked at him then, really looked at him. "You left without a word, Elias. Not a letter, not a call, not even an excuse." He stepped off the stone ledge, closing the distance between them by a few feet, but he didn't reach for her. "I was young, scared. I told myself I was protecting you from the mess I was about to become." "And what mess was that?" she asked, voice soft but sharp. "My mother was dying. I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know how to ask for help, so I didn't." She blinked once, the only sign that his words hit somewhere real. "I would have stayed," she whispered. "I know." Silence. "I thought I did something wrong," she said, her voice cracking like wet wood. "I spent months trying to figure out what I said, what I missed." Elias looked down. "You didn't miss anything." "I did." She nodded slowly, the emotion flickering in her throat and her jaw. "I'm marrying Colin tomorrow." "I know." "He's a good man." "I know that too." "Then why are you still here?" He met her eyes. Honest. Exposed. "Because even after all these years, I couldn't let the last time I saw you be the day I disappeared." Her breath caught, a near-silent hitch. The doors opened behind them. Colin's voice called gently, "Ivy? You ready to head up?" She stepped back instinctively, not guiltily, just protectively. "I'm coming," she called, eyes still locked on Elias. He said nothing more. He didn't try to stop her, just stood there as she turned and walked away. But before she reached the door, she paused. Without turning around, she said softly, "You don't get to fix this in a weekend." And then she was gone. and for the first time in years, Elias felt the sting of a truth he couldn't out-earn, outbuild, or outrun. Some things you can't rewrite. Not even with everything in the world at your feet. The morning light bled through the soft linen curtains, golden and quiet, the kind that made the world feel slower than it was. Charleston hummed outside the hotel window. Carriages clattered over cobblestone, and birds chirped with annoying cheerfulness. Elias had been awake for hours. He hadn't slept. He sat on the small balcony outside his suite, coffee untouched, shirt sleeves rolled up, fingers running through his hair as if trying to smooth thoughts that refused to cooperate. Her voice still echoed in his head. "You don't get to fix this in a weekend." He hadn't expected forgiveness, not really, but he also hadn't expected that look, the one she gave him before walking inside, that flicker of pain, of something unfinished. His phone vibrated on the table beside him. Miles. He let it ring. Instead, his gaze fell to the invitation again, now lying open on the table. Today was the day. Colin and Ivy. He couldn't explain the feeling tightening in his chest. It wasn't just regret. It wasn't jealousy. It was something more fragile, more brutal. Loss layered in slow motion. A knock on his door pulled him out of the spiral. "Elias, you in there?" It was Colin. Elias stood, brushed his palms against his slacks, and opened the door. Colin stepped in, grinning. His tie was half done, hair still damp from the shower. "You ready for tux duty?" Elias tried to smile. "Wouldn't miss it." Colin walked past him, admiring the view from the balcony. "This city, man. It's hard not to fall in love with it all over again." "Yeah," Elias said, watching him carefully. "It has that effect." Colin turned, leaned against the railing. "I'm glad you came. It means a lot." Elias nodded. "Of course." Colin hesitated, as if weighing something. Then he asked, "Can I be honest with you?" Elias's throat tightened. "Always." "Ivy's been off, just a little. Nothing big, just quiet. You know, since the dinner last night." Elias looked away. "Maybe it's nerves. It's a big day." "Yeah, maybe." Colin exhaled. "She told me you two knew each other. I didn't know it was more." Elias didn't answer right away. The air grew heavier. Colin tilted his head. "Was it serious?" There it was, the crack in the glass. Elias kept his voice low. "It was. Once. A long time ago." Colin nodded, taking that in. "She never mentioned it. Not once." "I didn't give her a reason to," Elias admitted. "I left. I didn't say goodbye." Colin's jaw tightened slightly, but not in anger. In understanding. "She's not the kind of woman you forget," he said quietly. "No," Elias said. "She's not." A pause. Too long. Colin pushed off the railing and clapped a hand on Elias's shoulder, not unkindly. "Whatever happened back then, it's in the past. Right?" Elias met his gaze. "Of course." But his chest ached at the lie. Hours later, the courtyard behind the hotel had been transformed. Wicker chairs were arranged in neat rows under a canopy of white blooms. Lanterns swayed gently from the oak trees. Everything was picture perfect, except Ivy. She stood under a shaded archway behind the setup, her hands folded in front of her, bouquet trembling ever so slightly. Brianna adjusted her veil, trying not to say what she was thinking. "You're beautiful," she whispered instead. Ivy nodded, distracted. Her eyes kept scanning the guests as they arrived. She wasn't looking for Colin. She was looking for him. "Elijah's here," Brianna said softly, following her gaze. "Third row, right side. Dark suit, no tie." Ivy's chest rose and fell slowly. "Why does it still hurt?" Brianna stepped closer. "Because some people don't just pass through us, Ivy. They leave something behind. I told myself I was over him. And maybe you are, Brianna said. But that doesn't mean you stopped wondering what it could have been. Wondering has its own kind of pain. The wedding planner appeared then, clipboard in hand. 5 minutes. Brianna kissed her cheek. I'll be waiting at the altar. She walked away, and Ivy stood there, alone. The music began. Guests rose. Ivy didn't move. Behind the arch, Elias turned just slightly in his seat, his eyes meeting hers for a second too long. Then she blinked and started walking. 1 step. 2. The hem of her dress whispering against the brick. But with every step forward, her heart seemed to pull in the opposite direction. She reached Colin. He smiled. She smiled back. But something in her eyes had dimmed. The officiant began speaking. Elias couldn't hear a word. The air around him was too loud with memory. Then Ivy spoke. Wait. The courtyard froze. She turned slightly, not away from Colin, but toward herself. Her voice trembled, but she didn't shy from it. I need a moment. Colin looked at her, confused, but said nothing. Ivy glanced at the crowd, at Elias, then quickly away. She turned back to Colin. I care about you, she said, softly but clearly. So much. And you've been nothing but kind and patient. But I can't stand here and pretend I don't feel the pieces of myself pulling in different directions. Ivy! Colin's voice cracked. Tears welled in her eyes. You deserve someone who doesn't hesitate when they say forever. Colin stood still, silent. She took a step back, the bouquet falling slowly to her side. I'm sorry. And just like that, Ivy Monroe walked away from her own wedding. Every guest stood frozen, except one. Elias stood too. But he didn't follow. Not yet. Some moments need to breathe before they become something more. The room Ivy had retreated to was silent, except for the soft, ticking wall clock and the thrum of her own heartbeat echoing in her ears. She sat on the edge of a velvet bench, her wedding dress now wrinkled and abandoned around her like a silk wave. Her hands trembled, fingertips pressing into her temples as if trying to hold herself together. She had never planned for this moment, never imagined walking away from her own wedding. Her bouquet sat discarded on the floor, its white peonies already wilting at the edges. The scent of roses and old wood filled the room, rich and suffocating. A soft knock came at the door. She didn't answer. Another pause. Then the door creaked open gently. Ivy? It was Brianna. She stepped in without waiting for permission and shut the door behind her, her heels clicking softly on the floor. You okay? She asked, her voice low, careful. Ivy didn't lift her head. Do I look okay? No, Brianna admitted, kneeling down to her level. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thoughts matter to me either way. You look like someone who just did the hardest thing of her life. Ivy laughed. It was bitter and broken. I thought I was sure. Collins, he's good. He's safe. He's everything I told myself I needed. Brianna placed a hand on Ivy's knee. But not everything you wanted? I wanted peace, Ivy whispered. I wanted to stop wondering, to stop looking over my shoulder for someone who left 10 years ago. And yet, Brianna said softly, he came back. Ivy's eyes filled again. Why now? Maybe because he's finally brave enough to face you. Ivy stared ahead. He should have been brave then, when it mattered. Brianna squeezed her hand. And maybe he knows that. The question is, do you still love him? I don't know, Ivy said, her voice tight. Or maybe I do, and I just hate that I do. Silence settled between them like dust. A few floors below, Elias stood at the bar, turning a glass of water in his hand. He hadn't left. He couldn't. Every fiber in him wanted to run up those stairs, find Ivy, say something, anything. but he knew this wasn't his moment. It was hers. Miles slid into the seat beside him, raising an eyebrow. That was dramatic. She walked away, Elias said, almost to himself. Yeah, from the altar. That doesn't happen every day. I didn't ask for this. But you hoped for it. Elias didn't respond. Miles leaned forward. You know what this feels like, right? Elias gave him a sideways glance. Miles smirked. A second chance dressed as a crisis. I didn't come here to blow up her life. She made the decision, Miles said. Not you. She's a grown woman. Elias exhaled. Yeah, but what do I do now? Wait, Miles said. And if you're lucky, she'll find her way back. Upstairs, Ivy had changed into a simple dress. Nothing bridal, just soft cotton, pale blue and easy to disappear in. She slipped on sandals, wiped her eyes one last time, and opened the door. The hallway was empty. She didn't want to face Colin. Not yet. Not with words. There weren't any that would make this feel okay. Instead, she slipped out through the side stairwell and into the warm, muggy air outside. Charleston was unusually quiet for a Saturday afternoon. The sun filtered through moss-draped oaks, casting shadows on the sidewalk. Ivy walked aimlessly, letting her steps decide for her. And somehow, they led her to the waterfront. She hadn't been back to this spot in years. The old bench by the iron railing still creaked the same way. The tide still whispered against the dock in slow, soothing rhythm. And when she sat, the ache in her chest loosened, just slightly. I didn't expect to find you here. Her breath caught. She turned. Elias stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, not moving closer. His dress shirt was rolled at the sleeves. No jacket, no tie, just him. Ivy looked away. Don't. I just wanted to know if you were all right. I'm not, she said plainly. He nodded. Okay. Silence stretched between them. She sighed. You don't get to show up after a decade and be the reason I unravel. I never meant to be. But you were. Elias stepped closer, slowly, as if approaching a wound. I came because I didn't want to keep pretending I wasn't still holding on. Her eyes narrowed. To what? Guilt? To you. The words landed hard. I tried to forget you, she whispered. I tried too, he admitted. But forgetting someone isn't the same as healing. She turned to look at him then, fully. The afternoon light catching the tears she hadn't realized had returned. Why didn't you call? She asked. All those years, not one message, not even to say you were alive. Because I thought silence would hurt less than the truth. What truth? That I was too much of a coward to love you while my world was falling apart, and I was too ashamed to come back once it did. He stepped closer now, only a foot away. I lost my mother. I lost everything I thought made me who I was. But what I really lost was you. She closed her eyes, a tear sliding down her cheek. You can't fix 10 years with a confession. I know. But, she said, voice cracking, it's a start. He didn't touch her, just stood beside her as she cried quietly, her breath catching in hiccups. When the sun began to dip lower, casting gold across the water, Ivy wiped her eyes and stood. I need time, she said. I'll wait, Elias replied. Even if it takes another 10 years. She gave a weak laugh through the remnants of tears. Don't wait that long, she said softly. If I forgive you, it won't be because you waited. It'll be because you showed up. Then she turned and walked down the path. And this time, Elias didn't let her disappear from his sight. The scent of fresh-cut flowers filled the air as Ivy pushed open the door to her studio. The bell above jingled softly, a sound she usually found comforting. Today it sounded too sharp, too real. Sunlight streamed through the front windows, illuminating the buckets of hydrangeas, peonies, and eucalyptus. Everything was in its place, her place, the one she built, the only thing she had full control over. Brianna stood at the work table, arranging centerpieces for a charity gala. Her head snapped up the moment Ivy walked in. "Ivy!" She set down a cluster of lilacs. "You shouldn't be here." "I couldn't stay home," Ivy said, her voice barely above a whisper. Brianna crossed her arms, expression unreadable. "You walked out of your wedding yesterday. That usually earns someone a few days of staying in pajamas and watching sad movies." Ivy smiled faintly. "I've never really done things the usual way." Brianna studied her, then slowly exhaled. "How are you really?" Ivy walked over to the long table, fingers brushing over the petals of a nearly finished bouquet. Tired, relieved, confused, all at once. Brianna leaned against the counter. "Colin called me this morning." Ivy's hands froze. "He's not angry," Brianna continued. "Heartbroken?" "Yeah, but he said he saw it coming. That you weren't really there these past few weeks." Ivy turned, guilt flashing across her face. He deserved better. He deserved the truth, and you gave it to him before it was too late. Brianna paused. "That's more than most people do." The silence between them softened, but only slightly. "I saw Elias yesterday," Ivy said, "at the waterfront." "I figured," Brianna replied. "He didn't leave the hotel until late. He told me why he left 10 years ago." "And?" Brianna asked. "He said he was scared, that his life was falling apart and he didn't know how to ask me to stay." Brianna tilted her head. "And you believe him?" Ivy hesitated. "I do." Brianna didn't reply right away. She returned to the arrangement in front of her, slipping a white garden rose into the center of the bouquet. "You know what I hate most about people who break us," she finally said. "They still own pieces of our hearts, even when they don't mean to." Ivy looked down, her voice barely audible. "He never stopped owning mine." Across town, Elias sat in the back booth of an old cafe near the marina, the kind of place with chipped mugs and the smell of bacon grease permanently embedded in the walls. It was the only spot in Charleston that still felt untouched by time. He stirred his coffee absent-mindedly, eyes fixed on the rain-speckled window. Miles slid into the booth across from him, brushing rain off his blazer. "You've officially become the guy who broods over black coffee after emotionally destroying a wedding." "I didn't destroy anything," Elias muttered. "You sure?" Miles raised a brow. "Because from where I was standing, there was a whole lot of not getting married happening." Elias sighed. "I didn't ask her to do that." "I know. But let's not pretend your presence didn't shift the axis. I didn't want to leave without telling her the truth." "And now?" Elias leaned back, running a hand down his face. "Now I don't know where we stand. She said she needs time." Miles sipped his coffee. "You've got time, but don't wait around hoping she'll do the work for both of you." Elias nodded slowly. "She built a whole life without me. I don't know if there's space in it anymore." "Make space," Miles said. "You're the one who left. It's your turn to prove you're worth keeping." That afternoon, Ivy stood at her workbench, slowly tying a satin ribbon around the base of the final centerpiece. Her movements were precise, automatic. But her mind wandered. She saw him standing in the rain the night before. The look on his face, not smug, not hopeful, just real. Stripped of the bravado he wore in his 20s. Quiet. Raw. She reached for her phone, opened a new message, and typed, "I'm going to the lake house tomorrow. Thought you should know." She stared at it for a long time, then hit send. The lake house hadn't changed much in 10 years. Still tucked beneath a veil of cypress and Spanish moss, still quiet except for the creak of the dock and the hum of cicadas in the trees. Ivy stepped out of her car, arms crossed tightly across her chest, the early evening air wrapping around her like memory. She walked slowly down the wooden path that led to the small cottage they used to sneak away to, before life had turned serious, before careers, before heartbreak, before silence. She pushed open the old screen door. It groaned like it remembered her. Inside, the air was still. Dust lingered in the beams of sunlight cutting through the windows. The couch was covered in a faded quilt. A book sat spine up on the end table, left right where they'd left it. She sat and waited. The door opened softly 20 minutes later. Elias stepped inside, eyes scanning the room before landing on her. "You came," she said. "You asked me to." He closed the door behind him but didn't move closer. "I haven't been here since you left," she finished. He nodded. Ivy looked around, exhaling deeply. "I used to think if I came back here it would hurt too much." "Does it?" "Yes," she said, "but in a different way." Elias took a tentative step forward. "I know I can't ask for the past back." "Good," Ivy replied, "because it's gone." They stood in silence. Then she asked, voice trembling slightly, "Why here? Why did you always bring me here?" Elias looked around the room. "Because this place made the noise stop. It made everything feel simple. When I was with you, it felt like breathing." Her eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. "And when it got hard, you held your breath and ran." "I did," he admitted, "and I regret it more than I've ever regretted anything." Ivy walked to the window, fingers grazing the sill. "I'm scared, Elias." "So am I." She turned to him. "If we try again, it'll be different." "I want different," he said. "I want real. I want now." She studied him, his face older but somehow softer. The man who had once broken her heart, and now might be the only one who knew how to carry the pieces. "I'm not saying yes," she whispered. "I'm not asking you to," he said. "I'm saying maybe." A pause. Then Elias smiled. "Maybe's enough for me." The morning light filtered through the curtains of the lake house, casting soft gold across the wooden floors and dust particles dancing in the air. Ivy sat curled in an old armchair, a blanket wrapped loosely around her legs, a mug of coffee cooling between her palms. The silence was comforting, familiar, but not empty. Elias stood at the stove, carefully watching water boil. His movements were slow, intentional, like he was learning the rhythm of the space again, like it mattered to him. He poured 2 cups of tea and crossed the room, offering one to her without a word. She took it, their fingers brushing briefly. Neither of them mentioned it. "Did you sleep?" she asked after a moment. "A little," he replied. "You?" "Enough to know it wasn't a dream." He gave a quiet smile but didn't push further. They sat like that for a while, letting the steam rise between them, letting the past rest just long enough to feel the weight of the present. Then Ivy set her mug down. "I told Brianna I came here," she said. Elias looked up. "How'd she take it?" "She asked if I wanted her to track your license plate." He laughed under his breath. "She still doesn't like me." "She's not supposed to. She loves me." "I respect that." "She also said if I give you another chance and you disappear again, she'll make sure I regret it." He met her eyes. "I won't." The silence stretched, thick with unspoken things. "You know," Ivy said softly, "I've spent a lot of time wondering who I'd be if you hadn't left." Elias leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "And?" "I think I'd be softer," she said. "Less guarded, but maybe not stronger." He didn't look away. "You shouldn't have had to get strong because of me." "I didn't," she said. "But I did get strong without you." That landed harder than any accusation. "I'm trying to earn the right to stand beside who you've become," he said, voice low, "not replace the space I left behind." She looked at him for a long time, as if measuring whether the words came from habit or truth. "I need to see who you are now," she said finally, "not just hear about it." Elias nodded. "Then come see." Her brow lifted slightly. "What does that mean?" "I'll show you where I've been. My world. Not the headlines, not the money, the real version." "You're inviting me to California?" she asked, surprised. "Just for a visit. Nothing more than that," he said. "No expectations. Just honesty." Ivy stared into her mug for a long moment, then gave a small nod. "I'll think about it." They packed up in near silence, folding linens, wiping down surfaces, locking the place like it was still sacred. When Ivy turned to leave, Elias hesitated in the doorway. "Do you still wear that necklace?" he asked quietly. She blinked. "What?" "The one I gave you the day we moved into our first apartment." She touched her collarbone instinctively, the familiar shape of a tiny gold feather tucked beneath her blouse. "I never took it off," she said. He smiled, just slightly, and followed her out the door. Later that afternoon, Ivy walked into her studio, the light from the windows warm and calm, like nothing in her world had shifted. But Brianna saw it instantly. "You look different," she said. "Different how?" "Like you're holding your breath, but not because you're afraid." Ivy set her bag down on the counter. "I might visit him." Brianna stopped mid-step. "Visit Elias? He asked me to see his world, where he is now, who he is." Brianna crossed her arms, concern flickering. "Are you ready for that?" "No," Ivy admitted. "But I want to be." "You really believe he's changed?" "I believe he's trying, and I want to see if that's enough to start something real, not pick up where we left off." Brianna softened. "Then I'll support it, but I'm also booking a flight for myself in case you need backup." Ivy laughed. "Deal." Meanwhile, Elias stood alone in the quiet of his Charleston hotel suite, suitcase open on the bed, clothes folded with deliberate neatness, but something in his chest buzzed with unease. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. He opened it to find Colin. Elias froze. "Colin." Colin gave a polite, unreadable smile. "Got a minute?" He stepped aside. Colin walked in, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the room like it held the answer to a question he hadn't asked yet. "I heard Ivy went to the lake house," he said. Elias said nothing. "She came to see you?" "She texted. I didn't ask her to." Colin nodded. "I figured." A beat passed. "I want you to know something," Colin continued. "I'm not angry." "You should be." "No," Colin said. "I think deep down I always knew she had one piece of herself locked away, and it was never mine." Elias swallowed hard. "Colin, I didn't come here to—" "I know why you came," Colin interrupted gently. "And if I were in your shoes, maybe I would have done the same." He paused, then looked directly at him. "Just don't waste what she's offering you. It's not a second chance. It's the last one." Elias nodded, the weight of it sinking deep into his gut. "I won't." Colin gave a tight, respectful smile, then turned to leave. As the door closed behind him, Elias sat down slowly, letting the silence settle again. He thought about Ivy, about the way she had looked at him in the lake house, not with longing, with uncertainty, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, he'd give her something better than memory this time. The plane touched down in San Francisco just after noon. Ivy pressed her forehead to the cool window, watching the skyline rise behind a soft haze. It felt surreal, being here. Not because of the city itself, she'd traveled plenty, but because of the reason she was here now. This wasn't a trip. It was a test. She'd spent the last 3 days convincing herself she was ready, that she could step into Elias's world with eyes wide open, no expectations, no illusions, just curiosity, and maybe quietly the kind of hope you don't dare say out loud. When the plane rolled to the gate, her phone buzzed. "Elias, I'm here. Gate 12. Also, Elias, I have snacks." She smiled, tension easing just slightly. He still had that dry humor, still knew how to find the one crack in her anxiety and slip light into it. She found him standing near the glass wall, wearing dark jeans, a white button-down, and a leather jacket that looked worn in all the right places. He looked normal, not like the man in glossy magazine profiles, just Elias. More grown, more grounded, and, she hated how her stomach fluttered, still impossibly handsome. "Hi," he said gently. "Hey," she replied, adjusting the strap of her carry-on. "I brought trail mix and fancy bottled water," he offered, holding up the evidence. "You really know how to impress a woman." "I do my best," he said. But the joke landed soft. His eyes never left hers. They walked through the terminal in easy silence. He carried her bag without asking. She didn't stop him. Outside, his car waited. Sleek, electric, understated. Not showy, not flashy, just like him now. "Nice ride," she said, sliding into the passenger seat. "I had a midlife crisis at 35 and decided to save the planet," he replied. She laughed. "How noble of you." They pulled into the city, winding through streets with pastel buildings and swaying trees. Everything about this place was busy and alive, but somehow it still gave room for reflection. "Where are we headed?" she asked. He glanced at her, a quiet smile tugging at his lips. "Not the office." "I hope not." "I figured we'd start with something simple," he said. "There's a cafe I like down near the marina. Nobody knows me there, just people and pastries." She looked at him for a long second. "And after that?" "Wherever you want to go." The cafe was tucked between a vintage bookstore and a flower stall overflowing with sunflowers and lavender. Ivy inhaled as they stepped out, cinnamon, espresso, and sea air all blending together. "This is charming," she said. "Don't tell anyone," Elias whispered. "It'll ruin my image." Inside, the owner waved at Elias with a familiarity that made Ivy pause. "You come here often?" she asked as they sat by the window. "Every Tuesday, same booth, same tea." She raised a brow. "You're a creature of habit now?" He shrugged. Predictability started feeling like peace. That stopped her. Just for a second. He noticed. "What?" he asked. "You used to chase chaos like it owed you something." "I know," he said, his voice softening. "I think I got tired of running in circles." The waitress brought over 2 teas and a shared plate of warm almond croissants. Elias broke one in half, handing her a piece. As they ate, he asked her about the shop, about Brianna, about how she spent her Sundays now. He listened, not just politely, but deeply, like every word was something he'd missed for years. "You seem," she hesitated. "Different?" he offered. She nodded. "But not just different. Present. You never used to be that." "I never knew how to be," he said. "Everything used to be a ladder. If I wasn't climbing it, I thought I was falling. And now?" He looked out the window. "Now I want to build something that doesn't need climbing." They sat with that for a moment. Then Ivy glanced down at her tea, swirling it gently. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "When you left Charleston all those years ago, did you ever look back?" His throat tightened. "Yes," he said. "Every day. I just didn't know how to turn around." She nodded slowly. "That's the part that hurt the most. Not that you left, but that you stayed gone." "I was ashamed," he admitted. I told myself I was doing you a favor, sparing you the worst version of me. But the truth is, I just didn't want you to see me weak." "You weren't weak, Elias," she said gently. "You were human." His eyes flicked up, meeting hers, and something settled between them. Not a resolution, but an understanding. After the cafe, he drove her through the old industrial district that had been revived with studios and quiet tech firms. They walked along the pier where small sailboats bobbed in the late afternoon breeze. At one point, a little girl ran past them with a pinwheel, her laughter echoing across the water. "You ever think about kids?" Ivy asked suddenly. He looked at her, startled, but not uncomfortable. "Yeah," he said. "Sometimes. I always figured if I had a family, I'd want it to look nothing like the one I came from." Ivy didn't press, but her eyes lingered on him. "Would you have wanted that with me?" she asked. He stopped walking. "I did," he said simply. "But I wanted to give you something whole. And I wasn't whole." She stepped closer, her voice almost a whisper. "And now? I'm still healing," he said, "but I'm not afraid to be seen in the process." A pause. Then slowly, she reached for his hand. Fingers interlaced, cautious and electric. They stood there quietly, the bay stretching wide before them, not holding on too tightly, but not letting go either. The next morning, the San Francisco fog rolled in early, wrapping the city in a hush that made everything feel paused. Ivy woke to the unfamiliar sound of city traffic softened by distance, a low hum beneath the chirp of birds outside Elias's condo window. The space was quiet, modern, but not cold. Clean lines softened by bookshelves filled with worn paperbacks and framed photographs, not of parties or fame, but of landscapes, moments, people who mattered. She moved slowly, padding barefoot across the hardwood floors, drawn to the view. The window spanned nearly an entire wall, revealing a stretch of the bay painted in silver and pearl. A soft clatter behind her. Elias stood in the doorway, hair tousled, holding 2 mugs. "I made coffee," he said, holding one out. "Though I wasn't sure if you're still a cream no sugar person." Ivy smiled sleepily. "Still am." They settled onto the couch, the quiet between them easy, natural. "Sleep okay?" he asked. She nodded. "Better than I expected. I was worried your first night here might feel strange." "It does," she admitted. "But not in a bad way." Elias looked down at his coffee, thumb tapping the ceramic. "I've thought about this moment more times than I can count. You being here. And I always imagined it would be harder," he said, "more awkward. But now that you're here, it just feels like breathing again." She didn't answer. Not because she disagreed, but because the weight of that truth settled too deeply in her chest. Later that day, he took her to the community space he funded downtown, a mentorship hub for teens interested in design and tech. The building was repurposed from an old theater, the marquee now reading, "Create Something True." As they stepped inside, Ivy was struck by the energy, walls covered in student art, a lab full of 3D printers humming, kids clustered around old laptops with big dreams. A young girl, maybe 15, waved excitedly. "Elias!" He smiled and crouched beside her workstation. "Sophie, you still turning that backpack into a solar charger?" "I made it better," she beamed. "Now it powers a phone and a flashlight." He looked at Ivy with pride. "She's going to run this city in 10 years. Ivy watched him, how naturally he moved here, how his presence didn't dominate but uplifted. He wasn't the silent CEO in this space. He was part of the rhythm. "This is what you do now?" she asked as they walked through a quiet hallway toward the rooftop garden. "It's part of it," Elias said. "I still build companies. But this place, this is what makes it worth building anything." She turned to him. Why didn't you ever tell me this was who you wanted to be? Because I didn't know, he admitted. Back then, all I wanted was success. I thought love would distract me. Now, I know love is the only thing that gives all the rest meaning. They reached the rooftop. The city stretched wide around them. Ivy leaned against the railing, her eyes closing for a breath. I don't know how to do this, she said softly. Do what? Be in something new with someone I used to know. Elias stepped closer, careful. Then let's not pretend it's the past. Let's not try to pick up where we left off. She looked at him. He continued. Let's start from here. From this version of you, and this version of me. A long pause, and then her phone buzzed. Ivy hesitated before checking the screen. Her expression shifted. What is it? Elias asked gently. It's Brianna, she said, reading the message. She says, Colin came by the shop. Elias froze. Did something happen? Ivy didn't answer immediately. She said he asked for the bouquet I had started for our wedding, the one I left unfinished. And? She told him it had already been taken apart, but that I was doing fine. Elias stepped back slightly. Do you want to talk to him? I don't know, she said honestly. Part of me thinks I owe him more than silence. But another part doesn't want to reopen something that's already closing. Elias nodded, staying quiet, letting her process. You're not responsible for how I feel about this, she added. But I need you to know. I didn't come here because I was trying to run away from that. I came because I wanted to understand something. What's that? If what we had before is still alive in any way that matters now. His voice was soft. And? She looked at him, eyes glinting with something halfway between fear and clarity. I'm still figuring that out. They left the rooftop quietly, hands brushing but not holding. Back at the condo, Ivy stood at the kitchen island, watching Elias prepare dinner. He moved with surprising ease, chopping vegetables, humming a soft tune, barefoot like he'd always been in the old apartment they once shared. I forgot you used to cook, she said. I forgot how much I loved doing it for someone who noticed. They sat at the small table by the window as twilight painted the sky. Everything felt suspended, like if they moved too quickly the moment would crack. After dinner, she lingered, running her fingers over the rim of her glass. What happens if this doesn't work? She asked quietly. Elias leaned in. Then we'll at least know we tried. Really tried. Not the rushed kind. Not the kind built on guilt or nostalgia. She studied him. And if it does work? His smile was slow, honest. Then we'll rewrite everything we thought we lost. She exhaled, a shaky breath that sounded like the start of a yes. Not a promise, but the beginning of one. The morning air was heavy with the smell of ocean salt and city steam, drifting through the open balcony doors of Elias's condo. Ivy sat curled up on the couch in one of his oversized sweaters, nursing a warm mug between her hands. The sweater still held his scent, clean, woodsy, faintly familiar, and she wasn't sure if that comforted her or made her chest ache more. He moved quietly in the kitchen, barefoot again, the way he always seemed to be at home. Eggs sizzled in the pan, toast popped behind him, jazz played low on the speakers. It felt like Sunday. It felt like something domestic, something dangerous. She watched him from across the room. He was humming, smiling slightly, and for a brief second, she forgot the years, forgot the pain, forgot everything except the version of him standing there, present, real, whole in ways he never used to be. Do you ever miss the noise? She asked. Elias looked over his shoulder. What noise? Limos, awards, flashbulbs, that whole curated version of you. He gave a low laugh and turned off the burner. You mean the guy in the glossy magazines who said he wanted to change the world, but didn't know how to keep a relationship alive for more than a year? She raised an eyebrow. That guy. He walked over with 2 plates and set one in front of her. He was exhausting. I liked parts of him, she admitted. Elias sat, his eyes steady. I think I pretended so long to be who the world wanted me to be. I forgot who I actually was underneath all that. And who are you now? I'm figuring it out, he said. But this, cooking breakfast for you while the city wakes up, it feels like part of it. They ate slowly, letting the silence stretch. Outside, fog clung to the edges of the skyline, and boats drifted lazily through the bay. Just as Ivy picked up her fork again, her phone buzzed across the table. Brianna. She hesitated. Elias noticed. You can take it. I know, Ivy said, but didn't reach for it. I know what she's going to say. What's that? That I'm falling into something I walked away from once already. He didn't flinch. Is that what this feels like to you? No, Ivy said. But I don't trust what I feel. Not yet. The honesty in her voice hung between them, unpolished and raw. I get that, Elias said. You're allowed to doubt. I just want to be the version of me that doesn't run from your questions this time. Her gaze softened. You've changed. I had to, he said. I lost too much not to. Later that afternoon, they wandered through a local artist market tucked into the Mission District. Ivy moved from booth to booth, drawn to hand-stitched journals and vintage glass. She lingered at a table filled with old maps, her fingers tracing the faded outlines of cities she'd never been to. Elias watched her from a few steps back, admiring the way she tilted her head when reading, the quiet joy she found in the smallest details. She felt real again, not like a memory, but like someone he still had a chance to know. They stopped at a food truck for lunch, sitting on a low concrete ledge while the city buzzed around them. Ivy dipped a fry into a cup of aioli and glanced at him sideways. So are we pretending this is normal? I hope not, Elias said. I like that it's not. She gave him a faint smile, but it faded quickly. Do people here know who you are? Some, he shrugged. But I've made it a rule. If someone recognizes me, I steer the conversation to something boring, like municipal water systems or tax law. Works every time. She laughed, then grew serious again. You really built all this? I did. And it never felt empty? He paused. It felt loud. It felt like it was supposed to be enough. But when I hit all the marks and still felt nothing, I realized I'd measured success by everyone else's standards. And now? Now I want quiet that means something. I want mornings with someone who remembers what I look like before coffee. I want presence. She looked down at the cup in her hands. It's scary, you know? What is? Letting yourself hope for something after you've already survived the loss of it once. He was silent for a long moment. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He handed it to her, and she unfolded it slowly. It was a sketch, hand-drawn. The lake house. Her eyes widened. You drew this? Last week, he said. After we left, I stayed up half the night with it stuck in my head. It's not perfect, but it's beautiful, she whispered. It's the only place I ever pictured building a future. With you. She didn't speak right away. Her fingers gently traced the pencil lines. Then, slowly, she folded the sketch back into neat quarters. I don't know if I can promise anything, she said. I'm not asking you to, Elias replied. All I want is the chance to try, with you. Not because of the past, but because we're here. Now. They sat in silence again, but this time it wasn't fragile. It was full of something that hadn't existed between them for a very long time. Possibility. That evening, back at the condo, Ivy stood at the window while Elias prepared tea. The city was glowing beneath the night, lights shimmering off the water. He walked over and handed her a mug. "Jasmine, your favorite." She took it, their hands brushing again. "Thank you," she said, eyes never leaving the skyline. "For what?" "For being someone I didn't expect to meet again, and not being who I feared you'd still be." Elias looked at her, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for still looking." She sipped her tea, let the warmth settle inside her, and nodded. And in that quiet, in that shared stillness, the first small thread of trust began to weave itself back between them. Not perfect, not sealed, but real. Rain drifted softly against the tall windows of Elias's condo the next morning, blurring the skyline in delicate streaks. Ivy sat at the kitchen counter, a half-eaten croissant on her plate, her phone glowing beside her untouched. She kept glancing at it, chewing slowly, the kind of distracted motion that had nothing to do with hunger. Elias was pacing nearby, scrolling through his tablet, reading off a list of names for a virtual mentorship event he had scheduled that evening. But her silence eventually caught up with him. "You okay?" he asked, setting the tablet down. She hesitated. "I talked to Brianna this morning." He moved closer. "What did she say?" "She's worried," Ivy said. "She doesn't want to be, but she is." He leaned on the edge of the counter, searching her face. "About us?" "About me," she clarified. "About whether I'm making choices from clarity or nostalgia." Elias nodded, quietly respectful. "And what do you think?" She finally picked up her phone and opened a message Brianna had sent. She read it out loud. "I'm not telling you to walk away. I'm asking you to slow down enough to know the difference between being pulled back into something and choosing it on your own terms." He let that land. Then softly, "She's right." Ivy blinked. "I don't want to be something you fall back into," Elias said. "I want to be something you walk toward, with your eyes open." She looked down at her lap, her fingers wrapping around the mug again. "You say all the right things now." He smiled faintly. "Only because I've spent 10 years replaying the wrong ones." She looked up, really looked at him. "Do you mean that?" "I do," he said. "But I also know talk is cheap, and healing doesn't happen in a week." Her shoulders dropped, the honesty disarming her. She nodded. "I'm scared that I don't know where the line is between moving forward and just circling back." "Then let's draw the line together," he said. "And if either of us feels it's not working, we stop." Ivy stood, her energy shifting. "I want to trust this. I do. But if this breaks again, I don't know if I'll come back from it." He stepped forward. "Then we go slow. We build something new. No pressure, no labels." Her voice cracked. "I don't need promises. You need presence," he said. "And I'm here." That afternoon they drove an hour north of the city to a quiet coastal town Elias had once considered buying property in. He wanted her to see more than just his city. He wanted her to see his rhythm, his quiet. They walked a trail along the cliffs, sea foam misting in the air, the Pacific roaring below like it had something to say. Ivy stopped at the edge of a weathered lookout, pulling her hair back against the wind. "It's so different from Charleston." "It is," Elias said, "but the air here has the same weight. Like it remembers things." She turned to face him. "Do you ever think we'd have found our way back to each other without all this?" He didn't answer right away. Then, "I think life would have had to shake us awake eventually." "Is that what this is?" she asked. "Awake?" He nodded slowly. "Fully." She stepped closer. "Then tell me something you've never said out loud. Not to anyone, not even to yourself." He didn't blink. "I didn't just leave Charleston because of my mother." Ivy went still. He swallowed hard. "When she got sick, I started falling apart. My dad had already cut me off emotionally years before. I didn't know how to handle real grief. I was watching her fade, and I couldn't fix it. And then I started thinking maybe everything I touched would break, including you. Her breath hitched. I convinced myself you'd be better off if I disappeared. Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. You weren't supposed to decide that for me. I know, he whispered. That's what I regret most. She turned away, wiping her cheek quickly. I spent months wondering what I did wrong. You did nothing wrong, Elias said, voice breaking. You loved me when I didn't know how to be loved, and I didn't think I deserved it. She faced him again, and for the first time the pain between them didn't feel sharp. It felt shared. I still wear the necklace, she said quietly. Not because I was waiting for you, but because it reminded me that I once let someone all the way in. He stepped forward, careful. Can I hold your hand? He asked. She didn't speak, just reached for him. Their fingers laced slowly, like they remembered how to find each other even after all that time. That evening, they returned to the condo and sat curled on the couch beneath a blanket, the rain returning as soft background music against the windows. Elias had lit a candle. The air smelled faintly of vanilla and cedar. I'm going back to Charleston at the end of the week, Ivy said softly. He nodded. I figured. I need to be home. I need to see my world again before I decide anything about yours. I'll walk you to your gate at the airport, he said, even if you don't look back. She smiled, the sadness in her eyes giving way to something more patient. You'll wait? I'll do more than that, Elias said. I'll keep becoming the man you'd want to come back to. And she believed him. Not because he said it perfectly, but because this time, he meant every word. The Charleston humidity wrapped around Ivy like a familiar, invisible coat as she stepped out of the airport. The sky was tinged with orange, the last light of day sliding behind the tops of the old church spires. This city hadn't changed much, but she had. The driver loaded her suitcase into the trunk without a word. She slipped into the back seat and stared out the window as the car pulled away from the terminal. Her thoughts were quiet, but not still. They turned in circles, around the softness of Elias's voice, the way his eyes held hers like he was seeing something new and sacred every time, the confession that cracked open something old inside her. She hadn't expected to leave San Francisco feeling steadier, but she did, and that frightened her more than anything. The car pulled up outside her townhouse, the one she'd picked after years of building her business from nothing. It still smelled like home. Lavender soap, aged pine floors, a faint trace of her favorite candle. She dropped her bag in the entryway, then stood there for a moment, just breathing. It was easier here, but that didn't mean it was right. Her phone buzzed on the table. Elias, land safe? She smiled. Ivy, home, exhausted, processing. Elias, I'll take that as progress. She didn't reply, not yet. She needed to sit with the silence before filling it. The next morning she walked into her shop just as the sunlight spilled through the front windows, casting long golden streaks across the workbenches and buckets of flowers waiting to be arranged. Brianna was already there, hunched over a clipboard. I was starting to think you'd run away for good, she said without looking up. I almost did, Ivy replied. Brianna looked up then, really looked at her. So? Was it everything you were afraid of? No, Ivy said. It was everything I wasn't ready for. They worked side by side for an hour, the conversation dancing around the edges of heavier things. It wasn't until Ivy reached for a spool of ribbon that Brianna finally asked it. Do you love him? Ivy's hand paused mid-reach. I don't know if it's the same love I once had, she said slowly. But it's real. It's grown up. It's honest. and it scares the hell out of me." "Sounds like the kind that might be worth something," Brianna said gently. Ivy nodded. "That's what I'm afraid of." A few days passed. Ivy poured herself back into work. Weddings, deliveries, late nights folding invoices and fixing loose arrangements. But everything felt slightly off balance, like she was playing a familiar melody on a piano that had gone subtly out of tune. Then came the invitation. It arrived by courier in a charcoal gray envelope with her name written in Elias's unmistakably neat handwriting. She opened it slowly, heart pounding. Inside was a card, simple, elegant. "I'm opening a second mentorship space in Charleston. The launch is Friday. You once told me this city deserved something good that lasts. I hope you'll come. No pressure, no expectations. Just an invitation." Friday came quickly. She almost didn't go. She changed outfits 3 times, stood at the front door with keys in hand for 10 whole minutes. But eventually, her heart overruled her fear. The space was beautiful. Once an old warehouse, now transformed with soft lighting, reclaimed wood, local art on the walls. A long table in the center held flowers, her flowers, and handwritten cards from students who would be part of the first program. Ivy stood in the doorway, taking it all in. Then she saw him. Elias stood near the back wall speaking to a small group of donors. He looked different here, rooted. Confident in a way that didn't need to be loud. When his eyes met hers, everything else in the room seemed to fade. He excused himself and walked toward her, slow, measured, like he didn't want to spook the moment. "You came," he said, voice quiet. "I wasn't sure I would," she admitted. "I wasn't sure you'd want to," he said. They stood face to face in the soft hum of conversation, the weight of the room falling away from them. "I see you now," she whispered. "Not just who you used to be, not just who I hoped you'd become, but who you really are." "And?" he asked, barely breathing. "I like this version of you," she said. His eyes flickered. "Is there room for this version of me? With this version of you?" She stepped closer, just enough for her hand to brush his. "I think there might be." And in the middle of a room full of strangers, past hurt and new beginnings, something steady finally took root. It wasn't a promise. It was a choice. And this time, they were both making it. The scent of fresh paint and newly sanded wood lingered in the air as the mentorship center slowly emptied. Ivy stood near one of the large windows, watching the soft flicker of string lights bounce off the glass. Her fingers rested on the edge of a display table covered in student journals, each one scribbled with the tentative beginnings of dreams. Elias approached quietly from behind. He didn't speak right away. He just stood beside her, close enough to feel the warmth of her arm through her blouse. "This place is beautiful," she said, eyes still scanning the room. "It's better with you in it," he replied softly. She looked over, cautious, but not guarded. "I mean it," Elias said. "The kids, the donors, the press. None of it hit me until I saw you walk through that door. I wasn't sure I'd make it," she admitted. "I wasn't sure I deserved for you to." He paused, then added, "But I'm grateful you did." Ivy smiled, the kind of smile that holds both peace and uncertainty. "You know, I used to think love was supposed to feel like a storm. And now? Now I think the good kind feels like this, quiet, steady, undeniable." They moved together without deciding to, walking through the space like they were circling something sacred. There was a quiet reverence in how they existed beside each other now, like they knew how fragile this all was, and yet were brave enough to keep showing up anyway. "Do you remember," Elias said, stopping near a bookshelf, "that summer we talked about buying a place together? Out by the marsh, with the wild magnolias? You were obsessed with that idea, Ivy said, laughing gently. You wanted a swing on the porch. And you wanted a clawfoot tub. Still do, she grinned. I never stopped picturing it, Elias said, even when we stopped speaking. She looked at him, heart suddenly tight. I'd see houses with wraparound porches and wonder what it would have been like if I'd stayed. If we'd built it. Ivy stepped closer, her eyes searching his. You still think about that? Every time I pass something with wild magnolias. The air shifted. She wanted to say something, but the words stuck in her throat. Elias didn't rush her. I'm not asking for the house, he said gently, or the porch swing, or even the clawfoot tub. Then what are you asking for? She asked. A chance to see where this goes, he said. At your pace, in your time. I've been so used to running my life alone, Ivy whispered. Even when I was with someone, I always kept a piece of myself back, just in case. I know, Elias said. I used to do the same. They stood there, quietly acknowledging the truth of it all, the fear, the hesitation, the years of building walls that were finally starting to come down. I don't want you to lose yourself in this, he said. I won't, she replied. Then I want everything you're willing to give. A beat. Then Ivy reached into her purse and pulled something out. A tiny folded piece of paper, worn at the edges. She handed it to him. He opened it. It was a sketch. The one he had given her. The lake house. But now Ivy had drawn something next to it. A small greenhouse. A place where flowers could grow year-round. You kept this, he murmured. I added to it, she said. He looked up and her eyes were shimmering. I don't know what this becomes, she whispered, but I want to grow it. Elias didn't touch her. Not yet. He just smiled, like something inside him had finally exhaled after years of holding its breath. I'll build the porch swing, he said. I'll fill the greenhouse. They both laughed softly, tears caught between joy and surrender. And there, in the soft hum of a space built for second chances, they stood, no longer wondering if love would find them again, but slowly realizing they had found it themselves. The sun was slipping low over Charleston, casting gold across the storefront windows and washing the sidewalks in light that felt like memory. Ivy stood just inside her flower shop, the faint sound of wind chimes echoing as the door clicked shut behind her. She placed her keys on the counter, glanced at the blooms in the cooler, hydrangeas, dahlias, soft white tulips, and exhaled slowly, as though grounding herself in their stillness. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't have to check the screen to know who it was. Elias, thinking about the greenhouse edition. I sketched something. Want to see? A soft smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. She typed back, Ivy, only if it includes space for peonies. A reply came immediately. Elias, obviously. Who do you think I am? She laughed to herself, then slipped the phone into her apron pocket, trying not to let the warmth of it distract her. There was work to do. Deliveries to schedule, invoices to finalize, a bridal consultation in 30 minutes. But the room around her felt different now. Like the energy had shifted, like the corners of her life were no longer so sharp. She was midway through reworking an arrangement when the door chimed again. Brianna stepped inside, holding 2 iced coffees and a suspiciously raised eyebrow. I come bearing caffeine and judgment, she announced. Ivy grinned, wiping her hands on a towel. Both necessary. Brianna handed her a drink. You've been floating since the launch event, and you didn't call me after, which means either something happened, or you're afraid to talk about it because something really happened. Ivy took a long sip before answering. Both. Brianna stared at her. Okay, start talking. Ivy hesitated, then walked over to the small sitting area they kept for client meetings. She sank into the tufted blue chair, coffee still in hand, heart beating too fast for how calm the room looked. I told him I wanted to grow something. Together. Brianna blinked. You said that? Out loud? I did, Ivy said. And I meant it. Her friend leaned back, visibly stunned. Wow. I know. Did he say it back? He didn't have to, Ivy said softly. He's showing me. Every day. Brianna nodded slowly. And how do you feel? Ivy thought about that. Really thought. I feel scared, she said. But it's a different kind of scared. Not like I'm going to fall apart. More like I might actually be building something real, and I don't want to ruin it. Brianna reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You won't. Because this time you're not doing it alone. They sat in silence for a few beats. The wind pushed against the shop's front windows, and somewhere in the distance, a train whistle called out like a memory passing through. Later that evening, as the city began to wind down, Ivy returned to her townhouse and found an envelope tucked in the doorframe. No name, just a simple charcoal gray sealed with wax. She opened it carefully. Inside was a folded page, Elias's sketch of the greenhouse. But this one was different. At the bottom, he'd added a note in his familiar script. Found a piece of land just outside town. Trees. Water. Quiet. I think you'd like it. I'd like to show you. She stared at the note for a long time, the kind of long that lets thoughts loop and memories settle. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from fear but from recognition. She grabbed her keys. 20 minutes later, she pulled up to the spot he'd marked on the back of the page. The land wasn't much yet. Just a gentle slope, tall grass, a stretch of trees leaning into one another like old friends. The marsh peeked through in the distance, silver in the moonlight. Elias stood waiting beside his car, arms crossed loosely, posture open. You came, he said, not surprised. You asked, she replied. They walked together through the field, the grass brushing their ankles, the air thick with that sweet coastal hush. Why here? She asked. Because it's untouched, he said. Because it's ours if we want it to be. She looked out over the space. It's wild. So were we, he said. Maybe still are. She turned to him, voice barely above the sound of the breeze. And if this doesn't work, we'll know we tried, fully, bravely, together. And if it does? He smiled. Then we get to stop looking backward. Her hand found his. And in the quiet of that open land, with nothing built yet and everything ahead, they stood facing forward for the first time in years. The future didn't feel like a leap. It felt like a path they could finally walk side by side. The air buzzed with summer heat and quiet possibility as Ivy stepped through the gates of the property again, this time with blueprints rolled under one arm and a worn sketchbook tucked beneath the other. The field, once just wild grass and whispering trees, had been mowed in patches. Surveyor flags danced in the breeze. It wasn't much, but it was beginning. Elias waited near the edge of the clearing, sleeves rolled up, clipboard in hand, scribbling notes next to a contractor's truck. He looked up the moment she appeared, the sun catching the edge of his smile. You brought the plans, he said, walking toward her. You asked for wild magnolias, Ivy replied, holding out the sketches. He flipped through them slowly, elevations, garden layouts, the soft outlines of a greenhouse that spilled light across the page. She'd drawn every detail like she already lived there. You designed this like it already belongs to us, Elias said, his voice lower now. Because I want it to, she said, but I need to know we're building the same thing. He paused. You mean us? I mean everything, she said. The land, the future, the pieces we're trying to stitch together. Elias studied her, then nodded, stepping closer. Then let's make this official. Her brow lifted. What do you mean? He reached into the back pocket of his jeans and pulled out a small envelope. Not a ring box, not a grand gesture, just an old letter. Ivy unfolded it carefully. Her eyes scanned the page. A simple contract. Co-ownership. Equal stake. No hidden clauses. No fine print. At the bottom, he had already signed. I don't want you to think I'm offering you something to stay, Elias said gently. I'm offering to build something with you, something we both belong to. She looked up at him, blinking quickly. You really mean that? I do, he said. No titles, no expectations, just us. Ivy stared at the signature. Then she reached into her bag, pulled out a pen, and signed her name beside his. And just like that, the foundation was set. That night they sat side by side on a blanket at the edge of the property. Fireflies blinked lazily around them, and the stars overhead began to spill into the dark like scattered promises. Elias poured 2 glasses of wine from a bottle he'd brought in a cooler, the kind with condensation dripping down its side. He handed one to her. To new things, he said. To brave things, she added, clinking her glass against his. They drank in silence for a while, letting the night wrap around them. Ivy leaned back on her elbows, eyes toward the sky. Do you ever think about how we found our way back here? She asked. Not just to this field, but to each other. All the time, Elias said, and I've stopped believing it was chance. She turned toward him. So what was it? Maybe we had to fall apart to learn how to hold something real, he said. Ivy smiled softly, her voice almost a whisper. I think I had to learn how to be my own anchor first. Elias looked at her, the reflection of starlight in his eyes. You've always been that. She leaned her head against his shoulder, and they sat like that until the air cooled and the crickets sang louder than the highway. It was the kind of quiet that didn't beg to be filled. It just asked to be felt. Eventually, he spoke again. I have to fly back to San Francisco next week. Ivy straightened slightly, her shoulders tensing. For how long? Just a few days. Closing out some things, he said. But I don't want it to feel like I'm leaving. She nodded, but her silence said more. I'll come back, he added quickly, before the walls go up, before anything is permanent. Ivy looked at him. This is the first time I don't feel afraid of being left. Because I'm not leaving, Elias said. I'm just making room for something better. She didn't reply right away. Then she said, The last time you disappeared, I didn't get to say goodbye. His voice softened. You won't need to this time. She smiled through the ache of that memory, laying her head back down against him. Just promise me something. Anything. Don't rush this. Let it become whatever it's meant to, even if it's slower than we expected. He exhaled. I've been running most of my life. I'm finally learning to walk. The breeze shifted gently through the trees, and for a moment it felt like the earth had sighed in agreement. No declarations, no grand endings, just 2 people sitting in the middle of a field, writing their next chapter in the stillness between stars. The house wasn't finished yet, but it was breathing. The framework stood tall, wrapped in a light coat of morning fog. Wood still raw, walls skeletal, beams reaching into open air like arms in mid-embrace. But it was there. Real. Tangible. A vision turning into structure, slowly, honestly, piece by piece. Ivy stood at the edge of the property, hands tucked into the sleeves of her sweater, her boots pressing into the damp soil. She could smell the earth, hear the birdsong, feel the shift of something deeper than just seasons. The greenhouse foundation was already poured. The space was small, intentional, just enough to grow what mattered. Behind her, Elias pulled into the gravel drive. His truck door creaked open, and then she heard the familiar rhythm of his steps approaching. Measured, quiet, no rush to interrupt the moment. He came to stand beside her without saying a word. They looked at it together. The future. "It's taller than I pictured," Ivy said. Elias smiled. "I wanted it to feel like there was always room to breathe." She glanced sideways. "You always say the right thing now." He shrugged. "Took me long enough to learn how." He reached into his coat pocket and handed her something. A simple, weathered key. Its teeth still rough, not yet worn smooth by use. She stared down at it. "It's just the key to the site gate," Elias said. "But I wanted you to have the first one." She took it, feeling its weight in her palm. "I didn't know we were doing keys yet." "We're doing everything one thing at a time," he replied. They walked the perimeter slowly. Ivy touched the corner post of what would be the porch. "I want to put a chair here, facing west." Elias nodded. "For sunsets?" "For remembering," she said softly. "Not dwelling. Just remembering the long way we walked to get here." He didn't speak, just reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. Later, they sat on a bench overlooking the marsh at the back edge of the property. The water shimmered in the light breeze, dragonflies skating over the surface. The silence between them felt full, not empty, like music waiting for the next note, not noise. "Do you think this is what peace feels like?" Ivy asked. Elias took a moment. "It feels like something that doesn't need proving anymore." She looked down at their joined hands. "I didn't think I'd get here." "Neither did I," he said. "But you know what changed it for me?" She shook her head. "You stopped being the end of the story I lost, and became the beginning of the story I still get to write." Her throat tightened. "You're really not going anywhere?" He looked at her then, seriously. "I've gone enough for one lifetime." She nodded, eyes stinging with tears that didn't need to fall. "I used to think love was supposed to rescue me. And now? Now I think it's supposed to meet me where I already am, and offer to stay." He exhaled slowly. "Then I'll stay." A few weeks later, the framing was nearly complete. The walls were rising, the floors taking shape. The builder asked Ivy where she wanted the kitchen window to face. She pointed north. "That way, toward the tree line. It's quiet there." He scribbled notes on the plans. Elias came by later with takeout and a bottle of sparkling cider. They ate on the floor of what would be the living room, blueprints beneath them, laughter echoing against unfinished walls. Ivy looked around the bare bones of the space. "No chandeliers," she said. "Agreed. No marble countertops." "Too cold," Elias added. "Just space, and light, and us." "Exactly." That night they drove back into town, parked outside Ivy's flower shop, and stood under the awning as rain began to fall. Slow, steady, cleansing. He kissed her there, not hurried, not unsure. Just a kiss that said, "We're here now." And when they pulled apart, Ivy leaned her head against his chest, listening to the heartbeat she hadn't heard in years. Not the physical one. The steady rhythm of someone choosing her without needing to be rescued. She looked up at him, lips barely parting. "You're my home now," she said. Elias didn't speak. He didn't need to, because the rain kept falling, and the lights from the shop flickered gently behind them. And somewhere, not far from that quiet street, a house was waiting to be finished. But the love, it already was, and it was enough.